Matthew's 5th chapter opens the long discourse tradition called the Sermon on the Mount, delivered on a hillside in Galilee near the beginning of Jesus' public work, before his disciples and the crowds who had followed him up from the towns and villages of the region. After pronouncing the blessings that open the sermon and describing his hearers as salt and light, Jesus turns from verse 17 onward to the relationship between his teaching and the law given through Moses. He insists that he has not come to destroy the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them, and unless the righteousness of his hearers exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, they will not enter the kingdom of heaven. What follows is a series of contrasts, each opened with "You have heard that it was said," and answered with "But I say unto you," moving from murder and anger to, in verses 27 and 28, adultery and the lustful glance. Verse 29 continues that same thought, pressing the demand for inward purity to its sharpest point. It reads, "And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell." The Greek word rendered offend is scandalizo, to trip up, to snare, to cause to fall into sin. The same term used throughout the discourse for whatever draws the heart away from obedience. Socinus would have pressed his hearers to notice that Christ is not legislating literal self-mutilation, since no one reading the sermon as a whole, with its call to love enemies and to strive after the perfection of the Father, could suppose that maiming the body accomplishes what only a changed will can accomplish. The image functions as the sharpest available picture of what it costs to renounce whatever leads toward sin, matching exactly the conditional pattern of the gospel as Socinus understood it. God forgives and grants immortal life to those who come to understanding, turn from worldly desire, and persevere in that turning even to the point of losing something as dear as an eye or a hand. Nothing here rests on a satisfaction already rendered. On the sinner's behalf, the whole weight of the verse falls on the hearer's own resolve, under the threat that the whole body, not merely a member, will be cast into hell. That final clause deserves attention, since it speaks of the body destroyed, not of a soul that by its own nature cannot die. The same pairing recurs when Jesus later warns his disciples to fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell, rather than those who kill the body only. Language that makes sense only if the soul, like the body, is capable of being brought to nothing rather than possessing an indestructible life of its own. A Trinitarian reader will note fairly that Christ here sets his own word directly against what had been said to the ancients through Moses, and that he does so on his own authority, using the emphatic "I say unto you" without appeal to any prior prophet or vision. Since it was God who spoke the law at Sinai, the argument runs, only God could speak with such unqualified authority to deepen or complete it, and this bare "I say" is taken as a quiet claim to the same authority as the lawgiver himself. The discourse itself resists that conclusion. Christ has just declared, 2 verses earlier, that he has not come to set aside the law but to fill it out, placing himself inside the same revelation rather than above it as its original author. Nowhere does he claim to have devised this teaching from himself. Rather, he later tells his hearers plainly that his teaching is not his own but belongs to the one who sent him, and that he has not spoken on his own authority, for the Father who sent him gave him commandment what to say and how to say it. Moses himself had promised that God would raise up a prophet from among the people, into whose mouth God would put his own words, commanding that whoever would not listen to that prophet would answer to God directly. The authority behind "I say unto you" then is precisely the authority of the sent prophet speaking words placed in his mouth, not the self-existing authority of the one who sent him. Every prophet in Israel spoke in God's name with a severity of sanction attached to disobedience, without thereby claiming to be God. What marks Christ is not a novel kind of authority, but the fullness and finality of the commission given to him, a commission the very next section of this discourse and the epistles both describe as a power granted to him afterward, in reward for the obedience he rendered even to death, rather than a glory possessed by him from eternity as very God. Read this way, the verse keeps its natural sense. The imperative falls on a human hearer concerning a human eye and a human body, spoken by a human teacher who insists throughout the sermon that he stands under the same God he proclaims, sent to unfold the Father's will in words the Father gave him. and empowered afterward to hold his hearers to that same word at the judgment. Nothing in the wording, the immediate context of the sermon, or the pattern of prophecy running from Moses through Christ requires the hearer to find here an eternal co-equal deity. Everything requires an obedient hearer who takes the warning of Christ, the commissioned Son, as seriously as the eye or the hand he is told to spare nothing to protect his whole self. In closing, I want to encourage you, examine for yourself, search diligently, read the scriptures with an open and rational mind. Socinianism does not rest on tradition or church authority, but on the conviction that God's truth is rational, clear, and morally sublime. If this perspective has resonated with you and you wish to explore the biblical Unitarian view further, visit www.socinianismus.de for in-depth articles, studies, and reflections on central theological questions. If this video has been helpful, please support this work with a like, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another contribution on the unity of God, the teaching of Jesus, and the rational interpretation of Scripture. Until the next video.